London, 1887. At Sotheby's auction rooms, a scroll is offered for sale. Only 4 years earlier, the British Museum was prepared to pay £1 million sterling for this scroll. But now...
14, 16 pounds,
18.
18 pounds, 18 pounds, sold at 18 pounds.
What is the secret of this ancient document? The Judean Desert, Palestine, 1877. At the lowest spot on Earth, in the Dead Sea Rift, in a temperature of 40 degrees centigrade, 3 Bedouin figures climb the hills, Ahmed and his companions, long sought by the Turkish authorities on charges of petty thieving. Here in a cave will be the start of an adventure that will echo throughout the world and will occupy specialists and researchers for many a long month. And it all begins with this clay jar. What is this grubby bundle of skins? Ahmed decides to find out just how much he can get for these in Jerusalem, up in the hills. Jerusalem at the end of the 19th century was reliving the thrill of rediscovering the Bible. Pilgrims and explorers from all over the Christian world were arriving in their thousands in order to undergo the spiritual experience of walking in the paths of the Old and New Testaments. Jerusalem was full of antique shops, serving the pilgrim trade. It is to one such establishment that Ahmed makes his way.
Salam alaikum.
The dealer, an experienced man, has a strange feeling about the finds. The hand trembles with excitement, but pays generously. Can this be a unique discovery?
يلا مع السلامة.
يلا شكرا. سلامات.
سلامات سلامات.
Here in this antique shop on the Street of the Christians in Jerusalem, the antiquary will set out on a new phase in his life. From now on, his entire existence will center around these written fragments. It is they which will determine his fate. A steady and experienced hand is needed to clean off the encrusted filth. And, sure enough, writing is revealed. The square letters of ancient Hebrew. The writing is identical to that which appears on pottery relics found in the region. Can these be the very same 10 commandments voiced by Moses as he took his leave of the tribes of Israel?
I am God, thy God, which liberated thee from the land of Egypt. Jerusalem, May 9th, 1883. Dear Professor Strack, I'm going to surprise you with a short description of a curious manuscript written in old Hebrew letters. It seems to be a short unorthodoxical book of the last speech of Moses in the place of Moab. Should you or your friends find it interesting, you may send me a telegram. Yours truly and obedient servant, M. W. Shapira.
Moshe, or rather Mr. Moses William Shapira, a dignified and prosperous merchant of antiquities in the Christian street in Jerusalem. He came to Jerusalem about 30 years ago. It was a small town of about 18,000 people, mostly Jews. The city was all within the walled city, very little water, lots of sicknesses. In one of the times when he got sick, he was attended by a German nurse whom he fell in love with. They got married, they have 2 daughters. Business is quite good, as you see. He buys all kinds of things and sells them. He buys mostly from Jews, old scrolls, books, and other things which they bring from all over the world into the Holy Jerusalem, and from Bedouins in the desert who are bringing all kinds of pottery, old coins, all kinds of things which he thinks he can sell, and regularly he sells this. He's a ladies' man. English ladies love him. They come and buy all kinds of things that he can only sell them. But his main business is museums and great institutions all over Europe. He's a correspondent for the British Museum, for other museums. He is well connected, travels a lot, and knows how to do some business. He is very careful. He never pretends to be a scholar. He buys and sells. The decision about the validity of his finds depends entirely on the scholars in the museums. Business is quite good.
Jerusalem at the end of the 19th century. The Middle East is in a turmoil. The competition is fast and furious. Experts are sent from Britain, France, Germany, and Italy to seek out the roots of Western civilization and to carry their finds back to the museums of their various capital cities. In 1880, they discover the tunnel cut by King Hezekiah in preparation for Sennacherib's siege of the Holy City, which sealed the well outside the city walls and guided the waters of the Gihon Spring into the city of David. Halfway along the dark passageway, there was a plaque describing the completion of the tunnel so long ago. In Egypt, the ancient Sphinx is uncovered beneath the sands of time. The secret of the pyramids is painstakingly researched, and hundreds of thousands of amazingly beautiful artifacts from the time of the pharaohs come to be housed in the newly established Cairo Museum. Across the River Jordan, a stone tablet is discovered, engraved with ancient Hebrew writing, the annals of King Mesha, boasting of his victories over the kings of Judah and of Israel in the 9th century before the Common Era. The Hebrew characters are sharp and clear. It is this very style of writing which appears on the scrolls which Shapira was examining. Shapira brings his find before the German consul in Jerusalem, one Professor Schroeder, both diplomat and amateur historian. Shapira asks a huge sum for his discovery, and Schroeder asks to examine the fragments, to have them verified by German specialists. The reward is promised, and is generous indeed. However, secrecy must be assured. This could be Germany's chance to lead the field in the race of historical research. But rumors are in the air, and at the French consulate in Jerusalem, tempers are running high.
This is Monsieur Clermont-Guénaud, diplomat in the French consulate in Jerusalem. He is an archaeologist. One day he hears about a German who found a strange stone in Transjordan called the Stone of Mesha. The story is long. Anyhow, the stone gets its way to the Louvre in France. The Germans are very annoyed. It's their discovery. How come this Frenchman took it from them? But here Shapira comes into the picture and tells them, you know, the investigations of that stone in Moab created quite an uproar and interest among the Bedouins. My shop is full of all kinds of potteries, little sculptures, all of it is Moabite. The Germans are very interested. They are buying hundreds and hundreds of pieces. The Germans are becoming the possessors of the Moabite culture. Ganot gets very annoyed. He goes over to one of the assistants of Mr. Shapira and is told that the pottery is produced right now in Jericho. All of it is a forgery.
However, not even this discovery by Clement Ganot can deter the cunning Jerusalem antique dealers. Forgeries are still turned out by the hundreds in underground workshops. Jerusalem has become a factory for historical finds. The world's museums have a seemingly insatiable appetite. The Berlin Museum acquires from Shapira no less than 1,700 Moabite idols, which, Shapira claims, were discovered by Bedouin nomads in the plains of Moab, bearing writing identical to the Mesha tablet. The French expert Clement Ganot's warnings sound like a voice crying in the wilderness. Berlin, June 1883. It takes some 6 years for Shapira to try and shake off the scandal of the forged Moabite idols. Finally, he arrives at the Berlin Museum to hand over his precious scroll fragments to Professor Strack and a panel of experts for examination. The examination is thorough and searching. The Germans are by now extremely wary of forgeries. Nevertheless, they are anxious to prove that the documents are genuine and to acquire them. The rumors about the Deuteronomy scroll are leaked to the German press. The public reads avidly, and choice excerpts from the Ten Commandments are quoted in the churches. And still, the German experts delay their judgment. Shapira loses patience with the Germans. He decides to take the scrolls to London, to the Palestine Exploration Fund, who are responsible for British research in the Holy Land.
The Palestine Exploration Fund is one of these great, benevolent British societies that are doing good. They are dealing in excavations in the Holy Land to prove the Bible true. They are, of course, very interested, but they have no money. They send him to the British Museum.
July the 23rd, 1883. The British Museum is prepared to consider acquisition of the Deuteronomy scrolls after a thorough examination and verification of their authenticity. Signed, Christian David Ginsberg, for the Department of Ancient Manuscripts, British Museum. London, the British Museum, a shrine housing the origins of Western civilization. And here, perhaps, a place will also be found for the scrolls of Deuteronomy, Shapira's discovery. Provided, of course, that they can be authenticated. He goes to the special department which deals only with religious scrolls. Here he is confronted by Dr. Christian David Ginsberg. Ginsberg cross-examines him. So do his assistants. The atmosphere is tense, suspicious. Ginsberg deciphers the script, translates it. Chemists are commissioned to determine the age of the fragments. There is a riddle to be solved: the differences between the accepted biblical text and the writings laid before them. Why is the name of God missing from this version? Is this really Hebrew writing from the time of King Mesha? Perhaps it dates back only to the Maccabees. Perhaps it is a style of writing still employed in later periods. The researchers check the dimensions of the scroll fragments, measure the size of the letters, the spaces between them, puzzle over the abbreviations. There are still a lot of riddles to be solved. The press runs wild. Endless reports about the drama taking place within the British Museum, daily discussions of work in progress, and daily excerpts from the decoded content of the fragments themselves. Newspaper readers in London at that time find extracts from the Ten Commandments, cheek by jowl, with political headlines and financial gossip. The days fly by. Encouraged by the enthusiastic press, Shapira sends off letters to other museums in Europe. Perhaps France would be interested, maybe Austria. The scrolls are up for sale to the highest bidder. The British researchers are worrying at the task like a dog with a bone. Perhaps the scrolls are of a much later origin.
My dear Dr. Ginsburg, is there still doubt about the originality of these scrolls? It is my belief that these scrolls were written when Moses was yet alive.
The days fly by. The answers are slow to come. The press continues quoting, "I am God thy God, who had liberated thee from the land of Egypt. I am God thy God." Shapira still awaits the verdict of the specialists. Will all Europe bow before him? Will the outcome be wealth and glory? Will the world acknowledge that this is one of the greatest discoveries of all time? As a result of the great public interest, the museum authorities decide to put some of the scroll fragments on display. The public reaction is remarkable. Deuteronomy becomes hot news overnight, mainly because their owner is asking such an astronomical price. The result is a sellout for the British Museum.
The newspapers are full of it. The London Times comes out with a tremendous headline. We need 1 million sterling to have the true Torah of Moses in our museum. The deal is almost clinched. The money is coming from the treasury. Shapira is the pick.
And it is this dramatic climax which marks the turning point. On the morning of Wednesday, the 15th of August, 1883, the French researcher Clément Ganneau arrives in London and sets his sights directly on the British Museum. Clément Ganneau is determined to prove that the Shapira scrolls are a forgery. And if this is not possible, to obtain them for the Museum of France. The Frenchman, however, does not give up easily. At long last, he gets an audience with the researchers, and they have no choice but to listen to what he has to say.
The skin fragments on which the scrolls are written are the work of a latter-day forger. Were you to give me a 300-year-old biblical scroll, I could myself inscribe in the Mesha tablet lettering a sequel to the Shapira scrolls.
Shapira feels betrayed, helpless. The experts are jumping to conclusions, influenced by this French scholar. "Forgery," scream the headlines. Professor Neubauer of Oxford University, "I am convinced that the entire text is a fake." Professor Sayce, "They must be a forgery." This was a bitter blow.
It is appropriate to conclude with the words from the London Echo Journal in August '83.
From the moment that the discoveries were announced, there was eagerness in many quarters, quite inconsistent with the true spirit of scholarship, to declare the manuscript as a forgery.
Shapira was the greatest forger in the history of this country. He had a long career of producing forgeries that filled, 100 years ago, museum halls in several countries in the world. Some of those collections are still to be found and are preserved in several places. There is good reason to believe that the Deuteronomy scroll was genuine. After all, the man had a very bad reputation.
Shapira was officially an agent to the British Museum, and he sold them many authentic manuscripts, both biblical and medieval, some were even rabbinics. He sold a beautiful Maimonides manuscript of commentary to the Mishnah, to the Berlin Museum, and even the San Francisco Public Museum purchased a number of manuscripts from him.
Even if we have one fraction of a possibility, it's worthwhile examining it. And examining it from every angle we approach it, it is very, very suspect. Now we know much better that those kind of letters were more appropriate to stone than to written material like parchment. After all, here in the shrine of the book, we have some 200 biblical manuscripts, and the Shapira text differs diametrically from those texts.
Ginsburg, a biblical authority, asserted that the first Hebrew words of the Ten Commandments, Anochi Elohim Elohecha, I am God, thy God, instead of the traditional biblical statement, I am the Lord thy God, Ginsburg claimed it is not biblical. It's not found in the Bible, and hence it's a forgery. Yet this expression, God thy God, or God our God, appears in the book of Psalms 4 times.
The British Museum, August 22nd, 1883. Dear Sir, on expert advice, the British Museum has come to the conclusion that the aforesaid scrolls are a forgery, and hence the museum is no longer interested in their acquisition. A copy of this letter was released to the press and published almost instantly all over the world.
Dear Dr. Ginsburg, you have made a fool of me. I do not think I will be able to survive this shame. M.W. Shapira.
March the 9th, 1884. In a small hotel in Rotterdam, Moses Wilhelm Shapira dies by his own hand.
Shapira was a very, very strange person. Also, his suicide act is a very strange thing. Here, a man with a wife and 2 daughters. Did he do it out of shame? Did he do it because he was disappointed with the cultured world of that time? We don't know. The fact is one, that people did not believe that scrolls of leather can be kept for thousands of years, but a few years ago we found out that they do keep, and the proof is in the scrolls of the Dead Sea that were found in Qumran.
60 years later, the Judean desert, 1947. An open cave gapes over a dry riverbed overlooking the Dead Sea. Bedouin nomads discover these ancient clay jars. Within them are fragments of skin. Once unrolled and deciphered, these prove to be parts of the book of Isaiah and other biblical writings. They are judged to be some 2,000 years old. The world-famous Dead Sea Scrolls. Today they are on display in the Shrine of the Book in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Their authenticity has been proved beyond the shadow of a doubt.
Where are the scrolls of Shapira? None of us knows today. Were they real? Were they a forgery? Big question mark.